So we're recording the session. Sadly, most of our students didn't manage to attend today. I will share my screen with XRHSL, HSL, and we'll continue with the class. I'll just hide the floating of the meeting controls, or whatever they are. Can you see the screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is the session, rule of thirds in photography. And this is just a bit of introduction. This kind of grid is the tool that helps people define and sort of say measure the composition within the rule of thirds. This is a set of screenshots of the photographs from my website, vxpictures.com. So the question is, what were the four elements of a good photograph? We are gonna, it's something that, you know, we talked at the beginning of the composition, good composition of the photograph. We say it was light, it was color, it was composition, and the subject. So these were the four elements of a good photograph. And what should we consider when we think of producing a good photograph? Well, your visual instincts. Who are you photographing? What's in your mood? Where is the shoot taking place? And what's going on around you? So your visual instinct is about understanding what you are actually willing to deliver, what you're actually willing to photograph, to capture, and how you want to do it. And that's something you build out a concept based in your narrative of understanding the subject, be it the person, their character, or the organization, which could be a movement, a political party, or a business group, or a family. Who are you photographing? Yeah, that's the importance of what I just talked about. And also, it is very important to understand what is their mood about the subject you're going to be talking about, when you're going to meet them, and how do you feel as a person about that particular subject you're going to talk, and that particular group of people you're going to meet, photograph. That also means where is the shoot taking place and what's going on around you, meaning what kind of objects, what kind of inventory, or what kind of trees if you're doing outdoor, and so on and so forth. That means you really have to visualize and understand the concept and the narrative you want to deliver as a photographer when you produce a photograph, be it a portrait, be it a group portrait, or a photographic matter that is related to the very subject your newspaper or magazine is writing about, or the sponsor, in this case, the organization you're working for, what is their character that they want, and what is their intention that they want to deliver through photography. What else? Composition is something we spoke about. The technical tangent, we already talked about in the previous session. And the context, something I just talked about earlier also, but also we talked in earlier sessions. And the gaze is yet another thing that we also talked about sessions. The gaze, the importance of where the eyes are laying, in your lens, in you, or around, or what's happening with their with the power of their face. So the good composition of the photograph means when we do a good composition of a photograph means also we have to follow about 8 steps. One of them is don't try to be perfect. It's important to understand that there is nothing such as a perfect composition. Please forget the idea that someone some person A, B, C, D, E, F, G is the best photographer. That is not the case. It might be the most hardworking person, which is the person that's actually committed and passionate about photography and about the job they're assigned to do. And that's what it could mean sometimes, the best photographer. However, for you to be the most renowned and recognized and acknowledged photographer, you really have to be passionate about photography when it comes to it, okay? Simplicity, just be simple. But we're going to stop now at the rule of thirds. However, we're going to continue on the fourth step, which is landscape and composition. Then the lines. How do you include in your photographs? Shapes, something we're going to see them through rule of thirds. Contrast within the subject. Framing. Again, how you frame a photograph. For example, the image that you see me now is a particular way of framing. Here above my head, you can see there is a frame behind me, right? That one. So this framing is kind of problematic, but we're not paying too much attention to it because I'm delivering a course. So the composition of a good photograph should or may always start with number one, all-time classic composition technique, which is a rule of thirds. Let's see some photographs. So here is the Ad Clark's photograph. Meanwhile, upon openly weeping Chief Petty Officer Graham Jackson, he's playing Going Home on his accordion, is in the time when US President Franklin Roosevelt, in April 1945, was his funeral going by. So this is a photograph that's composed applying rule of thirds. So to compose your picture according to the rule of thirds, you must imagine your photo divided into 9 equal parts using 2 vertical lines and 2 horizontal lines. And this is what we have. The subject is basically positioned at third in from the left-hand edge of the photograph, and his eyes lie a third in from the top, which is what it means, the application of the rule of thirds. Let's get a little bit closer. So in your iPhone, you can easily display these grid lines by going to the, to the switch grid lines on. You go to settings, photos, camera, and then you have an option. It's called grid. You can tick that on or off if it comes to it. In your camera, you have also in settings, and different cameras have different menus. So I'm not going to go through that detail, but you can find it. You can find the grid and you can activate the grid, and you have these 4 lines. If you have a live, if you want to have a live view option of the photograph before you want to snap. And otherwise, you can always have it in your brain. Imagine those 4 lines, 2 lines up, 2 lines, from left to right, and you can apply the rule of thirds in pretty much every photograph you shoot. This is another photo which applies the rule of thirds. And it's shot by Margaret Burke White. There's another one. Self-portrait of Bayard. The offended women. I will activate the grid. You can see now what it means. So why do we apply the rule of thirds? Using rule of thirds means the subject isn't centered on the image, which is how many new photographers frame their shots. Instead, the main focal point is a bit of to one side. So the idea is to give power to everything what's in the photograph, you know, even those secondary subjects or context in the photograph is no longer secondary, is as important as the primary. So, and that's what makes photograph a more powerful image, because you have multiple messages coming across very powerfully, and that's amazing. So, using rule of thirds, draw the viewer eye into composition instead of just glancing at the center. Basically, it's not, you're not just glancing in one person. You're literally seeing the entire photograph, because every single inch you move left or right, there is a story, and that story is something you can read, and that's what it makes powerful. Yeah, it's something I explained earlier, so you're just reading the paragraph as we go. But once again, see some other examples. You see, if you can see the mouse moving around the screen, all of this is the primary person, subject, and the image. These are still people that actually, if you see them, although they're blurred, it's still, you know, quite powerful, you know, story, sort of, to say. The entire photograph is still quite powerful, because you can see more to it, not than just this guy. And I'll activate those, and you can see that the grid. Here is another photograph with rule of thirds. This is shot in Aleppo in Syria. On one side, you have a family driving a kind of a little tractor, or I don't know, motorcycle, whatever you can call it. And then in the other side, you have the entire story by the actual landscape telling you what's going on in the country. There is something wrong. There is something chaotic. Here is another. Again, it was shot in Syria. So somehow this guy is the primary on the shot. But again, you have the stones, you have this pipe of the tank, and then electricity, you know, piles, another tank, and yet another child here smiling or laughing, whatever he's doing. His face looks quite like he's enjoying something. And again, here's the grid for you to understand that, the meaning of it. Of course, the more you practice photographs, the better you become, as I said earlier. And of course, eventually you will not have those grids in your mind, but you will be able to actually produce a decent photograph while applying rule of thirds. Once again, same, you know, kind of rules applying in this image. You see, although you can see two people kind of fleeing and leaving home or whatever they're doing, or traveling, some could argue, there is still story here, you know. There is this shoe here drowned, thrown away. There is this car about to go out. There is this other guy walking down the street. And then there is this entire light, which somehow shows that these two people are walking under some kind of a bridge or shadow. Grid back again. Here is another image with rule of thirds. So, as we say, to apply the rule of thirds means center your subject, look for triangles, consider framing, look for symmetry, look for leading lines, use diagonal lines, and keep the background simple. Which means if there is still more story in the background, please include it. Don't get it out. Or include it or entirely exclude it. You know, do something about it. Because the idea of our rule of thirds is also about creating a beautiful photograph, an image that's actually taken in entirely with whatever it is, whatever it has in it, with all its little bits and bobs, as we say. So that's very important. Any questions?
Not really. Only one thing. I never like these photographs where someone is gazing out of the out of the picture frame. You know, where kind of the environment is. Anyway, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're referring to the photographs that I showed you similarly, or
Pardon?
are you referring to the similarities of the photographs that the ones that I showed you, or?
I mean, you had one of those next to the Thames, I think it was. Where
Yeah,
the
yeah,
the person was looking to the right, and the other people were on the left behind that person. It kind of it feels. I don't know. There seems to be a tension in it that kind of doesn't really. I don't know. It doesn't work for me.
no, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. It doesn't, you know, photography is a very subjective thing, you know. And of course, the way I would shoot it, you wouldn't shoot it and vice versa. And that's what makes us unique. And that's what is amazing about it. Because also, what I see in a particular frame, you wouldn't necessarily see that moment. And also vice versa, you know. And that's the good thing about it. Because everyone sees something different, and that kind of a different, when it comes up as a photograph, is always beautiful. There's always a way that hasn't been seen, you know, a way that nobody else sees it. And if you capture it, then, you know, you have the opportunity to show the world that this is what I see, this is how I can see. And people will feel, you know, represented by certain images. And that's the power within it. Yeah, I will stop sharing the screen, and I will also stop recording. I wish good luck to all of you who've seen this video on the record.